So this question is, what is wisdom, first of all? Because a big theme of this work, and I think I've understated so far, and I apologize for that, is the idea of wisdom, because ultimately Socrates is claiming to this trial, this court, that he is the wisest, per the words of the Oracle Delphi. And his whole quest, since hearing that proclamation by the Oracle of Delphi, was to find out if it's true or not. His whole goal, according to the apology, was to find out the truth of whether he truly is, really is the wisest in Greece, or at least Athens, because I don't imagine he traveled too far to find this out. But that quest for truth ultimately led him to question people, and to find out whether they were smarter or wiser than him. And eventually he found out they weren't, at least in his opinion. He thought they weren't. So this asks us, this begs the question, what is wisdom, first of all? Now the definition, which often are just useless, the textbook definition of wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. The quality of being wise. The last one we can throw out, because then you have to define what is wise. Let's focus on the first. The quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. All of those kind of need their own definition as well, but experience, I would agree with that. You need some experience to be wise, likely. Knowledge depends of what, I suppose, and good judgment. That's very qualitative, but I think the ultimate key word there is judgment. You have to be able to pass some definitive statement about certain problems that are going to arise in your life. But anyway, on to what I think about wisdom, and ultimately I hope this opens the door to what you think about wisdom. And again, drop in the comments below, what is wisdom to you? In my opinion, though, I formed this not over just reading this work, to be fair. I formed this opinion over reading several other works. I'm sure we'll get to them eventually. But the first aspect that I think is absolutely essential to wisdom is humility. And I think Socrates makes that very clear in this work, and Plato likewise. Because ultimately it's Socrates' self-realization of his ignorance that leads to his being able to claim superior wisdom over all those that he questioned in Athens. Let me read a couple quotes that kind of highlight this. I found the men most in repute were all but the most foolish, and that others less esteemed were really wiser and better. The second quote is, well, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful and good, I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing, and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. And that's Socrates after discussion with a purportedly wise politician, whom he found out, though this politician claimed to know many things, he found out he actually didn't know much about those things at all. And Socrates claims in the end, and kind of concludes after many discussions with not only politicians but artisans and orators, all these different types of somewhat high up positions. They're perhaps not the highest positions in society, quite well off people, about what they know and what they don't know. And he finds that the majority of them, or actually all of them, excluding himself, think they know something that they don't. And this ultimately is the key to why Socrates is wiser, because he doesn't even pretend to think to know anything. Socrates knows he doesn't know much, and that's what makes him wise. He's a self-realization about his ignorance. That allows him to actually give a little bit more honest answers about things, I think. But ultimately, that really highlights the key component of wisdom, in my opinion. First, without humility, you cannot be wise. I can't think of someone you would call wise that isn't humble. Of course, when you talk about wisdom, you would immediately go to someone like King Solomon in the Bible, and I don't see any evidence until perhaps later in his life where humility isn't at least a reasonable assumption to make about him. Regardless, that's one of the three components of wisdom that I've kind of written down here for myself in my notes. Another is universality. I think, in general, wisdom isn't something that's usually applied to some just narrow particular problem. It's something that generally can apply to very broad problems across, perhaps even across different cultures and regions. When we think of, I think of little proverbs or wise sayings, and they're never these particular, niche subjects. They're not about niche subjects, about some esoteric field. It's usually something very practical that most people can relate to. So I think wisdom crosses borders readily. I think there's a very universal, global nature to wisdom. Perhaps what we think of wisdom in one culture might not perfectly align with wisdom in another culture. That might be a little different, but I think ultimately the problems that we face here in America, the base level, human problems, are really the same quite across the world, and wisdom is the secret knowledge that can solve many of those human problems, or at least make them less bad. Wisdom is kind of an antidote to the human condition. And the third component of wisdom that I've thought about is a certain pragmatism. Wisdom is never pie in the sky theory. It's always applied to very particular and well-defined problems. I think, again, this kind of ties into the last statement I made about universality and the human condition, but it's ultimately pragmatic because it helps us solve aspects or derivatives of that human condition. The fundamental problems we face, of disagreements between our neighbors and how we treat our enemies, that kind of thing. Things that have existed, same problems that have existed throughout all of history. That's my bit on wisdom. If you got more things to add, again, drop them below in the comments. That's what this is here for, to actually discuss about some of these topics. And again, I'm going to try to respond to some of these in future videos. Maybe I can make some kind of follow-up videos to answer some of the prominent comments I see in the future. But especially, I'll definitely respond in the comments, and we can keep that conversation going. And things that I really love, I'm going to bring out into the videos in the future as well, because I'm here to learn just as much as you are.